1369 subs. We did it, baby. Honestly, I never thought that 2 years ago when I started this channel, I would reach the monumental, the extremely meaningful milestone that is 1,369 individual, real human subscribers. Wow. But here we are. But honestly and obviously, I couldn't have done it without you, the actual subscribers, the viewers who are supporting the channel and helping it grow. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for supporting me. I'm more motivated than ever to keep putting out quality content for y'all. So today we're going to do a little Q&A where I go over some of the most interesting questions and some of the most common questions that have been asked so far and go into detail on some of my takes on these topics. And while we're at it, go ahead and drop any other questions you have in the comments of this video and I'll use some of those whenever I do another Q&A. Maybe when we get to 2,769, I'll do another one. Who knows? I'm also always looking for more video ideas, so if there are any sort of topics or video type formats that you want to see on the channel, feel free to suggest them. If I like the idea, it might inspire me to do so. I recently released a what I eat in a day video that's gotten a good amount of comments on it, and I probably wouldn't have done that if people hadn't specifically requested it. So feel free to drop any suggestions or future topics that you'd like to see, and I'll get to them when I get to them. I'm always open to experimenting with new formats and topics here. I know people in the YouTube space are always talking about how you need to niche down to really find your core audience, but honestly, I just want to make videos that interest me and that motivate me and that I personally would want to watch, and I have a lot of interests. So they're going to be what they're going to be. All right, let's get into the Q&A. So question number 1 is about warm-ups. This was actually a really interesting comment that someone left on my full high intensity workout video. So it's like an hour-long video where I'm just doing a high intensity workout, just a normal workout from my split back in July. And so this guy says, mate, how can you mention about warming up properly towards the end of the video when you only done one warm-up set for the first 2 exercises and then nothing else? Don't think this will be safe for anyone, let's say over 40. So I think this is a valid concern and an interesting question. So to make a long story short, as my grandfather used to say, how can I mention warming up when I only did one warm-up set myself? Well, the answer is very simple. It's because that's how I actually do it. I wasn't faking it for that workout, but for me, in that workout, just doing one warm-up set for my pushing exercise and one warm-up set for my pulling exercise was enough for me for the whole workout. I find that to be enough. And granted, I'm not personally over 40, but at 34 years old, I'm no spring chicken either. And I have a decorated history of injuries. I've had shoulder impingements, AC joint problems, bicep tendonitis, golfer's elbow in both elbows, costochondritis multiple times, and all of those happened during periods of time where I was doing a different type of training with a bit more warming up and a lot more total volume. So I think in my personal case, I don't think it was the warm-ups or lack thereof that caused or didn't cause my injuries, but rather it was just significantly higher volume than I was ready to handle and just not spending enough time recovering properly. Also, my client Morton, who I was training with last summer, was 43 and hadn't trained in many years, and he started on high intensity training with these minimal style of warm-ups, and he's been injury-free and making gains for about 8 months now. So shout out to you, Morton. So I don't think that high intensity training is necessarily impossible for older folks either. But of course, in general, as we do get older, we are going to have a little bit lower stress tolerance, be a bit more prone to injury, and have slower recovery. So you do need to auto-regulate and do what works for you. So that's my honest experience, which is of course why I said it and why I'm sharing it with you. But of course, that doesn't mean that your experience will be the same. We have different joints, we have different training histories, and luck will affect us both differently. Maybe you will benefit from more warm-ups. So the principle that I would recommend to you, dear viewers, is the following. Warm up enough to feel confident, to feel energized, and to feel like you can really give a working set or a top set your all. And do no more than that. That could be 1 set, that could be 5 sets. It's going to depend on you, it's going to depend on which exercises you're doing, it's going to depend on your familiarity with those exercises, and I can't give a blanket recommendation. But I would err on the side of starting up with slightly less warm-ups, and if you feel in those working sets that you're really just not as strong as you want to be, or you haven't really drilled the motor pattern enough, then add more warm-ups on subsequent times. So do what it takes for you personally to feel ready to go balls to the wall, but you don't need to do any more than that. There's no reason to waste more energy and time doing excessive warm-ups just because you've seen someone do that online, right? So for me personally, after I've done some overhead pressing as a warm up and then done a high intensity set of overhead press, I don't feel like I need to warm up for the incline bench press because I already worked those muscles. Now, could I get slightly better performance if I did another preparatory set to sort of really get myself focused on the exact movement pattern? Yeah, potentially, but it would also cost more time. And for me, that's not really worth it. I'm making good progress and I don't want to add things that are going to make my workouts longer to complete and like harder mentally to complete. So I'm not going to add more warm-ups than I think I need. Another consideration is how strong you are and how much weight you're lifting compared to like your body weight. So if you're a really strong person and you're benching twice your body weight or something like that, then yeah, you might find it pretty useful to do some warm-up sets and just get used to holding the weight and trying really hard. But when I'm doing chest exercises, it's more likely that I'm doing like weighted push-ups with like a quarter of my body weight added. And for that, I just don't need to warm up that much because it's not a load that's super intimidating to like my whole body. However, for squats and deadlifts, I do take a different approach because the weights I'm doing there are going to be more than my body weight, and they're really full body movements that I feel like when I've practiced the bracing a little bit more and just really felt like my back is super solid, then I'm ready to go hard. But it takes me several sets to feel like I'm ready. So just as an example, on a recent Zercher squat day, my top set was going to be 115 kilos. And so I did 30 kilos for 8 reps, then 50 kilos for 6 reps, then 70 kilos for 6 reps, then 95 kilos for 3 reps, and then finally 107 kilos till 7 reps. And that was very close to failure, but I didn't actually fail. So there I did 4 sets working up to my working weight, and I think that's about the minimum that I can get away with and still feel really good, really powerful, and like safe on squats. But every exercise is different. Another thing to consider with warming up is what rep range are you actually working in? So if you're doing 1 rep maxes, I think it does make sense to progressively add weight and get yourself really primed for an all-out max effort because you're going to be putting a huge amount of force on your joints in an extremely short amount of time, and having your technique and confidence absolutely dialed is super important. But I'm not doing 1 rep maxes in my regular training almost at all.
That was soul-searching.
Instead, I'm doing high intensity sets in the like 6 to 12 rep range roughly. So when I'm doing these, I'm not doing very explosive concentrics like I might do with a 1 rep max to just try to push the maximum weight possible. I'm trying to do controlled concentrics and eccentrics. So when I'm doing these, the first 3 to 5 reps, depending on how many reps I'm doing total, are actually not super hard, and they actually function as a continuation of the warm-up, right? It's only those last 3 to 4 reps that I'm really forced to put in a maximal effort. So when you're doing slightly higher reps, the total forces are lower and the speed that you're moving is also lower. So I think that mitigates the risk somewhat. The final tidbit I have on warming up is to just be cognizant of how experienced you are with a given movement. One of the other reasons that I warm up so extensively for squats is that I'm very new to them. I've only been Zercher squatting for like 2 months now, and so I still have a lot to learn. I'm still experimenting with my stance and my bracing and my breathing a lot. So it's useful to practice the movement a little bit more than I do some of the other ones that I've been doing for years. So when I'm adding new exercises to my program that I've never done before or that I haven't done in a really long time, I leave some reps in reserve for the first couple sessions. And in fact, in that same video where this comment was, I talk at the end how I was starting barbell side bends. And for the first several sessions, I left like 2 reps in reserve on that because I was new to it and I didn't want to overdo it and risk injury, right? So basically the first 2 sessions I did like 2 reps in reserve, then down to 1 rep in reserve, and then finally after like a month of training I finally went to failure. And then only after doing a few sessions to failure did I start adding drop sets and other intensity techniques. And that was sufficient for me to adapt to that new movement, practice it a little bit, and get started working really hard without any injuries. And I didn't have to do many warm-up sets. I could have done some warm-up sets, but I don't think I really needed to. And this is also exactly how I coach folks to start implementing high intensity for the first time. Your first month on high intensity training is just getting familiar with the movements, getting yourself into the rhythm and the flow of what a high intensity workout sort of looks like. Get used to not doing so many sets and so many exercises. And Start out with a couple reps in reserve and gradually increase the intensity over time. Maybe by the end of the first month, you're going to failure on like half your exercises. By the end of the first 2 months, maybe you're going to failure on all your exercises and starting to dabble with intensity techniques. This will set you up for sustainable gains for a long period of time because we want to make this a lifetime pursuit, right? We want a lifetime's worth of gains and a lifetime of being able to enjoy those gains and apply them to active living and just living your best life, right? And so I'm never going to be interested in trying to make the maximal gains in the first 6 weeks of a training program. I'm much more interested in figuring out what is a way that I can sustainably continue to make gains without getting injured, without getting overtrained, without getting burnout, so that I can continue to do it for decades. That's what I'm about here. And also because I've never seen any gains that anyone has made in 6 weeks on literally anything that are in any way impressive. Impressive gains come from 5 years of hard work, 10 years of hard work, or 20 years of hard work. So we really need to think long term on these things. So for example, when I started doing Jefferson curls, I started with the empty bar, and I have a 10 kilo bar, and I added 2 kilograms every session without ever skipping a weight. So now I'm up doing, I think, 72 kilos on my last session. And so I went from 10 to 72 in steps of 2. So it took me 30 sessions to get up to the weight that I'm working at now, which is like 8 months or something like that, right? So it's a very long amount of time, and I needed to be patient to do that. But by allowing myself to be patient, I slowly adapted and I gave my spine time to adapt to what is a pretty unique loading to it. So in that case, I think cautious loading with exercises where you don't have a lot of experience in and where your body's not well adapted to them currently, I think you can get a lot of mileage out of that in terms of injury prevention. And I think that can often be more important than how much time you spend warming up. But if you feel like you need to warm up more, then just do it. Ultimately, it's about finding sort of the minimum amount of warm up that you can get away with and still feel like you're crushing it and getting stronger and not getting injured. But for you, that might be a lot of warm ups. I'm not sure. Question number 2, where do I live? I live in Noumea, which is the capital city of the French Overseas Territory of New Caledonia. So this is located in the Pacific Ocean, Oceania, Melanesia, the South Pacific. The 2 closest island nations here are Fiji and Vanuatu. And honestly, it's pretty freaking dope here. We came here because my wife got a job. She's a marine scientist. And yes, we've been here for about 3 years now. And the first year was pretty tough because we didn't speak any French when we arrived. But once we started learning French and really starting to get integrated here, we've really grown to love it. The access to nature here is absolutely incredible. Much, much better than any other place I've lived. And so for me, at this stage in my life, that's what I really want. I want to spend time outside in the sunshine, seeing beautiful things and moving my body around. The flora and fauna here is a lot like Fiji or Vanuatu because they're pretty close, but there's way more access to public hiking trails here. There's way more fish in the ocean. The reefs are pristine, some of the best in the world, and there's almost no tourists here. It's crazy. But that kind of makes sense because no one's heard of this place. Personally, I find it to be a very nice change from where I grew up in Ohio. When I tell people who aren't from the United States that I'm from Ohio, I say, "Oh, do you know Ohio?" They're like, "Yeah, I think I've heard of that." And I say, "Oh, cool. Well, have you ever been there? You should go." And they're like, "Oh, well, no, I haven't been there. I've been to New York and I've been to California and I went to Yellowstone. I don't know if I'll ever make it to Ohio." And I think that, if people have heard of the place and they know enough to know that they'd never want to visit, it tells you something about that place that you grew up. But on the other hand, if people have never heard of a place and then because of their lack of knowledge, they're not interested in trying to go there, I think that's really what you want. That's the sign of a special place, that you found somewhere a bit off the beaten track. Okay, so the next question is about how many exercises per session or per week. So this guy says, okay, so is it 1 set per exercise, but do we do more than 1 exercise per session? And if so, how many? Like if I did bicep curls, can then I also do push-ups after that? Yes, you can definitely do push-ups after that. Like how many exercises per session? Please help me, I can't find any info. So in short, like almost anything, there's no one correct answer to this. There are tons of approaches that can work well. It kind of just depends on like what you like, what you have time for, and like what your goals are. If you have very specific goals and you only want to grow your biceps, then yeah, you could probably just do bicep curls, right? And that'll work really effectively. If you want to build whole body strength, then you're probably best off doing a lot of compound movements, as those are going to be more efficient at working most of your muscles. And if you have really specific weaknesses or just kind of niche goals, then you might really want to spend a lot of time working on sort of niche body parts. Like for me, I do a fair bit of finger training for rock climbing, but it wouldn't be that high of a priority if I just wanted to get overall strong, because your hands get decently strong from doing pull-ups and deadlifts. So in the high intensity realm, Mike Mentzer used to talk about training specific body parts from a bodybuilding perspective. So in his ideal program, it's basically one session per body part. So we would have like a chest and shoulders day or a chest and back day or something like that, doing 1 to 3 exercise per muscle group, and then extensive rest for many, many days before hitting those same muscle groups again. And I think that's a completely fine way to do it. The way I do it is a little bit different. While I am applying bodybuilding methodologies, I think my overall goals are not so much physique focused. They're really more focused on building overall body strength. And so I'm doing mostly compound exercises, which are exercises that have great potential for progressive overload in the long term, are the most important exercises for just sort of being generally strong. But I'm doing them with high intensity style programming because right now I feel like I need to build more muscle in order to then build more strength on top of it. At 6'1" and like 86 kilos, so like 190 pounds or something like that, I could probably support much more muscle than I currently have. And I think it's going to take that in order to actually get really strong. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of like my long-term plans. So how I like to think of it is that I choose a bunch of different exercises that are related to my goals, and I do each one of them for exactly 1 set per week. And then to choose how many exercises I'm doing for a specific sort of body part or movement pattern, I just choose those based upon my priorities. So right now I'm doing an upper-lower split where I do 2 upper sessions per week that all have unique exercises and 1 lower body session per week. So then to program your actual training sessions, you basically just want to choose some portion of your body to focus on and then choose like 4 to 7 exercises that focus on those body parts. So common splits are like push-pull legs. I'm not a big fan of this because usually it means you do each of those twice per week, which is like 6 training sessions, and that's a lot. And on high intensity, that could be pretty tough. So if you're doing high intensity, I think the 2 most viable options are just full body or upper lower. So as an example, for a full body high intensity training, you could do 2 compound push exercises, 2 compound pull exercises, a squat, a deadlift, or another hinge or leg movement, and then maybe 1 isolation that's really motivating to you. If you're doing full body workouts, high intensity style, you're probably going to need to stick mostly to compound exercises. Otherwise, you'll have to add a huge number of sets to hit most of your body. And the point of high intensity is that the longer your workouts get, the less intensity that you can actually save for subsequent exercises. So it just doesn't work so well. So you're probably not going to have time for more than 1 or 2 isolations in a full body high intensity program. And so if you were doing full body twice a week, you could either do the same exercises each session, so repeating exactly the same session twice a week, or you could do what I prefer, which is to choose completely different variations of those exercises to do in the different sessions. So as you'll see in my current split, the only exercise that I'm actually repeating twice in 1 week is hammer bar rows, and everything else I'm doing just once. But essentially, I'm just doing different variations of very similar movement patterns. So I'll do the behind the neck press one day, and then I'll do a seated overhead press the next day. I'll do ring push-ups in one session and ring dips in another session. And there are a couple reasons that I like programming like this over just hammering the same exercises in every single session. The first is that by doing multiple variations, you give your muscles a slightly different stimulus and hitting it from different joint angles while still having quite a lot of overlap. And I think this variety and slightly different moving patterns is one of the things that helps my joints stay feeling fresh. And it also feels like I'm getting a well-rounded stimulus on most of my muscles throughout a whole week period without having to do several variations in one session. And there's also a huge mental benefit that I really like. And this is the ability to progress several different movements independently of each other. Because as I'm always saying on this channel, progressive overload is like the secret sauce that makes training work. And it's also the secret sauce that helps keep me motivated to keep training week in and week out, because I'm always seeing these tiny little improvements and I'm always just so stoked to make them. And I'm so excited for my next session to go to try my hardest to beat my previous PB. And so if I was just doing the overhead press like 3 times a week, I think that I could still gain strength effectively from that. However, because I wouldn't be giving myself enough time between the workouts and the sets to observe large changes, I think I'd have more sessions where I'm just like, okay, Well, I got 10 reps again. Well, I got 10 reps again. And I just wouldn't really be able to measure the changes that I was making, even if it was effective at making changes when I looked at it in the long term. In contrast, if I do like 4 different variations of overhead pressing, I'm much more often able to observe gains in either weight added or reps added, because between each individual session, I've had enough time to adapt and get better at it. And yeah, I find this makes training more fun. And ultimately, if it's fun, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it with gusto. And that's super important. Okay, so for the final question today, what is my current training split? So I've written it out for you, and I'll put this up on the camera. But here it is. So basically I'm doing 3 sessions a week. I'm doing an upper lower split. So I'll do Monday, I'll do an upper body workout. Wednesday, I'll do a lower body workout. And Friday, I'll do an upper body workout again. For the past year and a half or so, I was just doing 2 full body workouts, but the only legs I was actually doing was like a little bit of Romanian deadlift. So I wasn't properly training my legs at all, because at that point, my goal was to improve my upper body strength while remaining relatively light for climbing. Now in this year, I'm actually trying to gain weight, and I'm just really motivated by trying to get strong in my legs and just get strong overall throughout my whole body. So of course, yeah, that means training my legs again, right? I also wanted to try out training 3 times a week, up from 2 times a week. I did 2 times a week for like 16 months or so and saw really, really good results with that. And I'm curious to see if by adding a little bit more volume and frequency, I get better results or worse results. So I've now been doing this for about 3 months, and I would say the results are quite similar, but I'm of course getting more done because I'm training more body parts overall. So that's good. However, I really need to take thoughtful deloads in this style of training, because training 3 times a week just leaves me way more exhausted than 2 times a week did. So let's look at the Monday session. Monday, I start off with the BTN press, or the behind the neck press. I'll do 1 warm up for this, and then I'll do 1 warm up for the next exercise, which is my hammer bar row, which is just like a barbell row, but I use a neutral grip, which feels very, very good on the elbows. So after I do 1 warm up for each of those, I go back to the BTN press for my working set, then I do the hammer bar row for that working set. Next, I move on to the seated overhead press. I don't do a specific warm-up for this because I feel very good after already having done the BTN press. Then I do behind the neck pull-ups, and nowadays I'm doing them weighted. Then I do weighted ring push-ups, and then the Jefferson curl. The Jefferson curl I do a warm-up for, because the previous 4 exercises where I'm keeping my torso pretty much rigid the whole time are in no way a good warm-up for doing the Jefferson curl. So I usually do a warm-up somewhere around 40 kilos and then a working set wherever I'm at, which is usually between 60 and 70 now. And then I finish off with the hanging knee raise. I really like pairing the Jefferson curl with the hanging knee raise because both of them involve spinal flexion and extension, whereas the Jefferson curl kind of compresses the spine on the way down and then stretches it out at the bottom. This one stretches out the spine in a completely different way, and they both feel fantastic. That's my upper day with 7 exercises. The last 2, I guess, are like core work, basically working on my low back and my abs. Then I rest up good on Tuesday, and then Wednesday I hit my leg day. So the primary exercise is the Zercher squat. As I mentioned, I do several warm-up sets on this, working up to my working weight, and then I'll do the lateral raise. So I call this a leg day, but it's actually like a legs and arms day, because I find that when I'm doing leg training, it's like so much more intense than upper body training that I need more rest afterwards. And so it's pretty easy to do some arm isolations during that rest time without substantially increasing the time of the workout. In this case, I do lateral raises unilaterally on my incline bench. Then I move on to the Nordic curl, which I do full range of motion band assisted reps on that one. And honestly, that's one of my favorite exercises of the whole week. The DOMs you get in the calves and the hamstrings from this method of doing the Nordic curl are just insane. Oh my God. Then I do overhead triceps extension on my hammer bar. Then I do the range of motion split squat. And finally, I finish up with hammer or bicep curls. So that's my legs and arm day. And then I rest up again. And then on Friday, I hit my final upper body day. So I do an interior deltoid press with arms really close together. I learned that one from Dominic Sky, I think, a couple years ago, but hadn't actually had an apparatus that let me like work it easily. But now with this hammer bar, it's very easy to do. Then I do some chin-ups, then I hit the incline bench, and then finally the hammer row again. Then I'll do ring dips, and then I'll do this exercise, barbell side bends, which basically work the obliques and the QL and just sort of, work in flexing your spine from side to side. So now let's talk sets and reps. For all of them, I'm doing just one top set, but I might do multiple warm-up sets as I described earlier. And I'm basically doing a sort of wave periodization. So basically on the first week of the month, I'll aim to hit a 12 rep max in my top set. Then the next week, I'll aim to hit a 9 rep max in my top set. And then the next week, I'll aim to hit a 6 rep max. So it's basically like 5-3-1, but instead it's 12-9-6. So just a slightly more moderate rep range that I think works better for high intensity style training and for doing just one set. And then the fourth week of the month, I do something that actually I'm really excited about, which is whatever the hell I want to do. I try to make the fourth week of the month just fun. So sometimes I'll try working up to like a 1 rep max in one of my exercises. Last month I was working on cyclist squats instead of Zercher squats. On one of my upper body days, I just focused on handstand push-ups. On one of my other upper body days, I just focused on front lever progressions. But basically my only rules are that on my upper days it has to be an upper body workout, on my lowers it has to be a lower body workout, and that I can't do the same thing I would normally do in my programming. So this gives me a chance to sort of experiment with different exercises, with different programming techniques, different rep ranges, etc. And it just spices things up a little bit. It also sort of functions as a deload week. Because overall I end up doing quite a bit less volume. Although sometimes like when I work up to like a 1 rep max, it's not a really effective deload. However, I do think it's a very effective mental deload to just not be grinding at exactly the same program all the time. Yeah, it's just a time that I can have fun and sort of just appreciate what it is I really like about training, which is just learning to move my body and just trying hard and learning new things. So that's my split right now, and I'll keep you guys updated in the future on when I change it. Awesome, folks. We just finished up with our first Q&A. I appreciate your time very much. If you want to support the channel, please subscribe and share this with your friends. If you want, you can download my free program, The 2-Hour Body. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, check out my website or DM me on Twitter. Thank you guys so much. Have a very strong day. Let's get strong for life together.